CEO, fired employee. 5 minutes later, he regrets everything. It was an ordinary Monday morning at Pinnacle Technologies, a leading software company, and James Hawthorne, the company's CEO, walked into his sleek office with a steaming cup of coffee. He was known for his sharp mind, an iron fist leadership style, and little tolerance for mistakes. To him, business wasn't personal. It was survival of the fittest. That morning, however, James was unusually irritable. A high-stakes merger was falling apart, and deadlines loomed dangerously close. He slammed the door behind him, startling his assistant, Sarah, who timidly greeted him with a nervous, "Good morning, sir." James barely acknowledged her. His calendar was packed, and the day ahead felt suffocating. Worst of all, there was one employee, a young programmer named Daniel, who had been consistently underperforming. James had already heard from middle management that Daniel was falling behind on a critical project. The project's failure could cost the company millions. "Bring Daniel to my office, now," James ordered Sarah, his voice cold. He didn't have time for explanations or excuses. Today was about getting results, and if someone couldn't keep up, they were out. 5 minutes later, Daniel Parker stood in front of James's massive oak desk. Unlike the imposing CEO, Daniel was soft-spoken and unassuming. He was in his late 20s, dressed in a rumpled shirt and khakis. His eyes reflected a mix of exhaustion and anxiety. "Daniel," James began without preamble, "this isn't working. I've received multiple reports about your inefficiency and inability to meet deadlines. Do you have any explanation for this?" Daniel looked down at his shoes. "Sir, I've been trying. It's just that trying isn't enough in this company," James interrupted, his tone sharp and unforgiving. "We operate at the highest level here, Daniel. We don't carry dead weight. Effective immediately, you're terminated." Daniel froze. His lips parted as if to protest, but he couldn't form the words. His hands trembled slightly as he processed the weight of the decision. James stared at him, unyielding. "You'll receive your severance package," James continued, waving dismissively toward the door. "Security will escort you to clear your desk." For a moment, Daniel looked as though he wanted to say something. His eyes flickered with a deep, unspoken sadness, and then he turned around and left without another word. The door clicked shut. James sighed heavily and leaned back in his chair. To him, it was just another necessary decision, another tough call in a cutthroat world. 5 minutes later, James's phone rang. Sarah's voice came through the intercom, shaky and unsure. "Sir, it's urgent. You're going to want to see this." "What is it now?" he grumbled. "It's the project, Daniel's project. There's been a mistake." James frowned, suddenly attentive. "Send me the details." Moments later, Sarah forwarded an email chain and a set of files to his computer. As James began scanning through the documents, his heart sank. The mistakes and delays in Daniel's work weren't his fault. It became glaringly obvious that another senior team member had been sabotaging the project, deleting code, mislabeling files, and deflecting blame onto Daniel. Daniel, to his credit, had been quietly fixing the errors behind the scenes without ever pointing fingers or making excuses. In fact, James realized that Daniel had been the reason the project was even on track at all. His contributions were immense. The sabotage was subtle but undeniable, the senior team member likely covering their own incompetence. "How did I miss this?" James muttered to himself, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He read further and saw that Daniel had even sent an email just days earlier, asking for a meeting to discuss the project's irregularities, an email James had ignored. Panic set in. James sprang from his desk and stormed out of his office, startling the employees on the floor. He passed Sarah, who looked at him with a mixture of confusion and worry. "Where's Daniel?" James barked. "Security. They escorted him out." "He's probably gone, sir." James felt his pulse quicken. He grabbed his phone and dialed HR. "I need contact information for Daniel Parker, now." The HR representative on the line hesitated. "Sir, he's no longer an employee." "I don't care. Just get me his number," James snapped. Half an hour later, James's sleek black car screeched to a halt in front of a modest apartment building. It was pouring rain, and James ran up the steps, soaking his perfectly tailored suit. He knocked frantically on the door to apartment 3B. The door opened slowly, and there stood Daniel, looking surprised and a little wary. He was holding a cardboard box filled with his personal items, clearly still reeling from being fired. "What are you doing here?" Daniel asked, confused. James, out of breath, ran a hand through his wet hair. "Daniel, I made a mistake." Daniel blinked. "What?" "I messed up," James repeated, his voice softer this time. "You weren't the problem with the project. Someone else was sabotaging it, and I didn't see it. I fired you without listening or looking at the facts, and I was wrong." Daniel stared at him, stunned. I need you to come back," James continued. "You're one of the most talented people we have. I didn't realize how much you'd done to keep that project alive. Please, Daniel, I want to make this right." For a long moment, the two men stood in silence. Rain pattered against the roof, and James's usually unshakable demeanor was replaced with genuine regret. Finally, Daniel set the box down and looked at James with a faint smile. "I'll come back on one condition." "Anything," James replied quickly. "Treat your employees like people, not numbers. If you'd listened in the first place, none of this would have happened." James nodded slowly, realizing the truth in Daniel's words. "You have my word." The following week, Daniel returned to the office, greeted with applause and heartfelt apologies. The real saboteur was identified and terminated, while James made a company-wide announcement about the importance of listening to employees and treating them with respect. From that day forward, Pinnacle Technologies wasn't just a company known for its success. It was one where employees felt heard, valued, and understood. As for James Hawthorne, he never forgot the lesson Daniel taught him, a lesson about humility, listening, and recognizing that the people behind the work are what truly make a company thrive.